Be me, 23, just graduated with a communications degree. I've been back living at my parents' house for a few months, mostly because rent around here is insane, and entry-level jobs in my field pay less than what I made waitressing in college. Still, I try to convince myself, and anyone who'll listen, that I'm on the verge of big opportunities. Truth is, it's humiliating sometimes. When old classmates ask me how things are going, I throw out lines like, "Oh, I'm between projects right now," or "I'm looking at offers." What I don't say is that I'm sleeping in the same bedroom I had in high school, scrolling job boards half the day, and still letting my dad's hard-earned money keep the lights on. And that's the part that makes the irony sting. My dad's a plumber, has been for as long as I can remember. He runs his own small business, Dan's Plumbing and Heating. Same ugly logo on the van since the early 2000s, faded and peeling. Every time I see him roll up in that thing, I cringe a little. It just feels low class. Not the kind of thing you brag about when your friends ask what your dad does. So the other night, we're sitting down for dinner. Mom made roast chicken, and Dad's in his usual work shirt. The navy one with his name patch stitched over the pocket. His hands are knuckled, calloused, permanently stained from decades of pipes and chemicals, the kind of hands you can't scrub clean. Dad starts telling a story about his day, something about a burst pipe in a family's basement. He's describing how he had to crawl through the mud, cut out a section of pipe, solder a new line, blah blah. He's actually smiling about it, proud, and I just couldn't help myself. I roll my eyes and say, "So basically, you unclogged someone's toilet again. That's what? The highlight of your day?" The table goes quiet. My mom lowers her fork mid-air, staring at me like I just slapped him. My aunt, who's visiting, raises her eyebrows but smirks like she's waiting for drama. And Dad, he doesn't react right away. He just cuts into his chicken, slow and steady, which almost makes it worse. I keep pushing. I mean, Dad, come on. You fix pipes. It's not exactly rocket science. It's just toilets, You've been doing the same thing since before I was born. Don't you ever want to do something more? Meaningful? Mom clears her throat sharply, the way she always does when she's trying to signal me to shut up. But I ignore it. I start going on about how my career path is going to be different. How I'll work in PR, or media, or maybe something global. How I'll make an impact instead of crawling around in basements all day. I didn't spend 4 years in college to come home covered in dirt and sewage, I add, smirking like I've just made a point. Dad finally looks up. His face is neutral, but his eyes are harder than usual. "You think my job's easy?" he says. "Come on," I answer, leaning back in my chair. "You've been doing it for decades. You could probably do it in your sleep. Don't act like it's complicated. It's just pipes and wrenches." That's when he puts his fork down. His voice stays calm, but there's this weight to it I'm not used to hearing. "If it's so easy, you try it. Come out with me for a week. I'll make you my apprentice." I laugh immediately, because it sounds ridiculous. Me, crawling under sinks with him? Not happening. But Mom's eyes light up like she thinks it's a great idea, and my aunt chuckles, "Oh, that'd be good for her." A little hard work never hurt anyone. Now I'm cornered. If I say no, it looks like I'm scared. If I say yes, at least I can spin it into a story later, how I slummed it for a week for laughs. In my head, I'm already imagining posting about it someday, or at least having funny anecdotes for my friends. A week of tagging along, maybe carrying some tools, then I'll have proof forever that it's beneath me. So I shrug. Fine. A week, but don't expect me to get excited about tightening screws. Dad just nods once, goes back to eating, and doesn't say another word, which weirdly makes it worse, like he already knows what's coming. The rest of dinner stays quiet, except for the sound of silverware. Mom keeps sneaking glances at me like she's waiting for me to realize what I've done, but I just sit there smug, still convinced I'll come out on top. At least, that's what I thought at the time. The first thing I learned about helping my dad is that his day starts before the sun's even up. He woke me at 6 in the morning. 6. On a Monday. I was half asleep, hair a mess, still in pajamas, when he knocked on my door and just said, "We're leaving in 20. Like it was normal. I thought maybe he was exaggerating when he said he worked long hours. But no. He meant it. I scrambled into leggings and a hoodie, slipped on my white sneakers, and tied my hair back in a bun. No makeup, because it was too early, and honestly, I thought we'd just be driving around. Maybe visiting a site or two. Easy. Observing. When I came downstairs, Dad was already at the door with his thermos, steel-toe boots on, tool bag slung over his shoulder. He gave me a once-over, frowned, and tossed a pair of thick work gloves onto the counter. "You'll need those," I laughed. "Dad, I'm just tagging along." He didn't even answer, just walked out to the van. The van itself smelled like metal, sweat, and stale coffee, with old work orders stacked on the dashboard. My sneakers stuck a little to the floor from some dried spill. Definitely not the polished office environment I pictured myself in after graduation. Our first job was a crawl space leak under an old rental property. The landlord met us in the driveway, frantic because water had been dripping into the basement for 2 days. I figured Dad would go in. I'd hang back. Wrong. He handed me his tool bag, heavy enough to nearly pull my shoulder out of its socket, and said, "Bring that." The crawl space was dark, damp, and smelled like mold mixed with wet dog, the kind of place horror movies start. I tried crouching down, but the second I felt mud soak through the knees of my leggings, I froze. A rat darted across the beam a few feet away, and I yelped so loud the landlord laughed. Dad didn't even flinch. "Hold the light steady," he said, sliding into the muck like it was nothing. For the next hour, I knelt there awkwardly, my arms shaking as I held the flashlight while he cut out a section of pipe and replaced it. At one point, he told me to hand him a wrench from the bag. "Which one?" I asked. "The crescent." I stared at the pile like it was a foreign language, finally grabbing the wrong one. When I tried handing it over, my elbow clipped a valve. Suddenly, a cold burst of water shot out, splashing me across the chest and face. I gasped, sputtering, mascara from the night before I'd forgotten I had on running down my cheek. The landlord covered his mouth, trying not to laugh. Dad just sighed, turned the valve off properly, and said, "That's why you pay attention." His voice wasn't angry, which somehow made it sting worse. By the time we finished, my sneakers were soaked, leggings stained, and hair full of cobwebs. It wasn't even 9 a.m. yet. The second job was at an elderly woman's house. She opened the door, saw me standing behind my dad, and her eyes widened. "Oh, you brought your daughter," she chuckled. "Didn't expect to see a girl plumber." "This works tough on the muscles, sweetheart." I forced a smile, but my stomach twisted. I wanted to disappear. Dad just nodded politely and walked past her to get started. This time, he had me hold a section of pipe while he cut it. My arms burned after 30 seconds. "Dad, it's heavy," I complained through gritted teeth. "Then hold tighter," he said, without even looking up. When he turned the water back on to test the line, I flinched, expecting another blast in my face. He didn't comment, but I caught the hint of a smirk. At lunch, he pulled into a gas station, bought himself a sandwich and coffee, and sat in the van. I expected we'd go somewhere normal, but he just unwrapped it on his lap and ate in silence. I picked out a granola bar I'd brought, still damp from the earlier spray, trying not to gag at the lingering smell of mildew on my hoodie. The rest of the day blurred together. A clogged sink with slimy black gunk that almost made me vomit, a leaky faucet, another crawl space. Each place was the same, me fumbling with tools, getting dirty, trying not to breathe too deeply. By the time we drove home, I felt like I'd run a marathon in flip-flops. I dragged myself into the house, collapsed on the couch, and groaned loud enough for Mom to hear me from the kitchen. She peeked in, half smiling. "Long day?" I muttered. "I don't know how he does this every day." Dad walked past me, still calm, still steady, like the whole day hadn't fazed him at all. He rinsed his hands in the sink, poured himself some water, and sat down with the paper, like it was just another Monday. Meanwhile, I was wrecked, and it was only day 1. Day 2 was worse. Way worse. I thought maybe my body would adjust overnight. Nope. I woke up sore everywhere. Arms, back, even muscles I didn't know existed. I shuffled down the stairs like a zombie, already dreading the van ride. Our first stop that morning was a diner. Their kitchen sink was backed up, and the owner practically dragged us inside as soon as we pulled up. The smell hit me immediately. Rancid grease, old food, something sour that clung to the air like a curse. Dad got straight to work, pulling the cover off the drain and threading this long, coiled metal snake thing into the pipes. He handed me the crank. "Turn it," I gagged. "Dad, it smells like death." "Then don't breathe through your nose," he said calmly. I tried turning the crank, but it was stiff and jerky. After about 30 seconds, my hands were slipping on the handle. "It's stuck," I complained. "No, you're just weak," the diner cook muttered from the corner. I snapped my head toward him, ready to say something, but Dad cut in first. "Keep turning." I glared at both of them and shoved harder. That's when the snake caught on something, jerked, and I lost my grip. The coil whipped back, splattering me with a glob of greasy black sludge. It dripped down my cheek and into my hoodie. The cook burst out laughing. Even Dad smirked while wiping the mess off with a rag. I slammed the crank down and shouted, "This is disgusting." Who would actually choose to do this? Dad didn't answer. He just finished the job himself while I stood in the corner fuming, arms crossed, smelling like rancid French fries. By the time we left, I wanted to crawl back into bed and pretend none of this ever happened. But no. He had 3 more calls lined up. The next job was a water heater replacement in an apartment complex, which sounded simple until we had to actually move the old one out. It was huge, heavy, and dripping with rusty water. Dad told me to help guide it down the stairs. The first step we took, the thing sloshed and leaked all over my sneakers. I shrieked and jumped back, nearly letting go. "Keep your hands on it," Dad barked. "I'm not touching that." "It smells like a sewer." "Then don't let it spill." I gritted my teeth and shoved from behind. Each step was a battle. At one point, I slipped and almost got pinned between the heater and the wall. By the time we got it to the bottom, I was shaking with rage. My hoodie was streaked with brown water, my arms trembling from the weight. A group of kids from the building had gathered at the bottom of the stairs, watching us like it was a circus act. One little boy whispered loudly, "She doesn't look like she knows what she's doing." His friends giggled. I snapped, "Do you want to try carrying this yourself?" The kids scattered, laughing even harder. Dad shot me a look. "They're just kids. Relax." That almost made me explode. I was soaked, exhausted, publicly humiliated, and he was telling me to relax? By late afternoon, we had one last stop. A noisy tenant complaining about pipes knocking in the walls. Dad explained it was water hammer, then handed me a wrench to help tighten a fitting. "Just hold it still." I did. Or tried to. My arms were shaking so badly that when he twisted the other end, my grip slipped. The wrench clattered to the floor and smacked my ankle. I yelped and kicked it across the room, swearing under my breath. The tenant raised an eyebrow. Dad just picked the wrench up, said nothing, and finished the adjustment like he was working alone. By the time we got home, I was beyond furious. My clothes smelled like grease. My hair was stuck together from God knows what, and every inch of me hurt. I slammed my bedroom door shut and threw myself on the bed, half tempted to quit the stupid apprenticeship right then. But the thought of Dad quietly smirking if I gave up made me even angrier, so instead, I laid there seething, telling myself tomorrow had to be better. Spoiler, it wasn't. By day 3, I'd had enough. When Dad knocked on my door at 6, I pulled the blanket over my head and snapped. "No, I'm not going. I can't do another day of crawling in filth." For a moment, there was silence. I thought maybe he'd argue, force me out of bed. Instead, his voice was calm, almost too calm. "Fine. Don't work. Just ride along. Watch. Maybe you'll learn something." That tone made me feel like a sulky teenager, but I stuck to my guns. When I finally dragged myself out to the van, I sat slouched in the passenger seat, arms crossed, making it clear I wasn't lifting a finger. The first stop was a little house on the edge of town. A middle-aged guy in work boots answered the door, shook Dad's hand, then looked at me, standing behind him. "So this your daughter?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm, his apprentice this week." I made finger quotes around the word apprentice. The guy squinted. "Doesn't look like it." I laughed nervously. "Well, I've been helping, but today I'm just taking it easy." He chuckled, then shook his head like he'd seen enough kids like me. "Taking it easy? Your dad's crawled onto this house more times than I can count. I've called him out here in the middle of the night during storms, and he shows up. Doesn't matter how cold or muddy it is. He gets it done. Never heard him complain once. And you're already on break after 2 days? My face burned. Well, plumbers don't exactly make that much anyway. That's why I went to college. I'm aiming a little higher, you know? The man actually laughed. Don't make money. Kid, you have no clue. I'd pay double what he charges if it meant he showed up right when I called. You know how many people out here would kill for someone as reliable as your dad? I stared at him, stunned. Dad kept working, saying nothing, tightening fittings in the basement while I stood frozen in the doorway. The customer leaned closer, lowering his voice like he wanted the words to stick. You don't even realize how lucky you are. Most people your age can't even change a light bulb. Your dad's not just fixing leaks, he's saving people from disasters. Think about that before you roll your eyes at him. I swallowed hard, but no comeback came. When Dad finished the job, the guy pulled out his checkbook and scribbled quickly. He handed over the slip like it was nothing. Worth every penny, like always. Dad folded it neatly and tucked it into the chest pocket of his work shirt. I caught a glimpse of the number. My stomach flipped. That was more than I made temping 2 weeks at the front desk of a dental office, and it was just one job. On the way back to the van, I walked a step behind Dad, staring at that folded paper in his pocket. My head buzzed. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe I imagined an extra zero. In the van, while he was jotting notes on the work order, I couldn't stop myself. So, do people really pay that much? He didn't look up. They're paying for the job done right. And the years it takes to know how I crossed my arms stung. Still seems like a lot for pipes. That's when he finally looked at me. His voice was steady, not sharp, but the words landed hard. Funny? Didn't seem like a lot when it was paying for your tuition. I went silent. My chest felt tight, like he'd punched the air out of me. He slid the folder back into his pocket and started the van. I stared at it, burning with curiosity. By the time we pulled into the gas station for his lunch, I couldn't resist. While he was inside, grabbing his sandwich, I leaned over, tugged the folded slip out of his pocket, and opened it. The number was even bigger than I remembered. For a job that had taken barely an hour, he'd made more than my monthly rent would be if I ever managed to move out. I sat there holding it, my hands shaking slightly. I wanted to crumple it, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't look away. The number screamed at me, proof that everything I'd said about his job being beneath me was a lie I'd told myself to feel superior. When Dad got back in, I shoved the slip back into his pocket without a word. He noticed. I know he noticed. But he didn't say a thing. He just unwrapped his sandwich, started eating, and drove to the next job like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I sat stiff in the passenger seat, feeling smaller than I had in years. For the first time since this whole bet started, I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was embarrassed. By the end of the week, I looked like I'd been through a war. My sneakers were trashed, my hoodie permanently stained, and my hands rough from cuts and scrapes. Every part of me ached, even muscles I didn't know I had. Dad drove home like always, calm, steady, as if this week had been no different from any other. I sat slumped against the window, silently counting the minutes until I could shower and bury myself in bed. That night, we sat around the dinner table again. Same chicken, same table, same routine. Except now I was hunched, sore, and looking like I'd just lost a fight. Mom glanced at me with this knowing look, but didn't say anything. Aunt, though, leaned forward with a grin. So, she asked, did you learn a thing or two helping your dad this week? All eyes turned to me. My chest tightened. A part of me wanted to just admit it, to say I'd been wrong, that plumbing wasn't easy, that I finally respected what Dad did, but I couldn't. My pride wouldn't let me. So instead, I scoffed, forcing a laugh. Honestly? Yeah, it was gross. And yeah, it's harder than I thought. But let's be real. The only reason men dominate plumbing is because women haven't been given the chance. If more women were trained, we'd probably do it better anyway. Men just act like it's some elite skill to make themselves feel important. The table went quiet. Dad didn't argue, didn't laugh. He just set his fork down, looked at me once, and said, "Now you know." And I did. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Not to them, not yet.